2, 1.
Good evening, and welcome to the Wednesday, March 28th, 2018 meeting of the Long Meadow School Committee. I call the meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded and aired live by LCTV, as well as being live streamed on longmeadow.org. It is a legal requirement for anyone else to disclose if they are recording this meeting. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have no correspondence for the evening, and I'm going to just rearrange the agenda tonight to start with a center school presentation that we have. So come on forward.
So
Very excited.
A quick introduction of Valerie Fritz. There she is. Valerie's our reading specialist at Center School. Has put together a cool project that Karen had the opportunity to see one night, and so we're anxious to introduce Valerie and her Center School students. So come on up, Valerie, if you.
Right, and that's it's the.
Yeah, it is an on-roll. Yeah.
I don't know where you want us to stand. We're just standing in front of the projector, but we could stand over here. Or is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for letting us present tonight, and thank you for some people that are watching it for a second time. This project it's a full collaboration between all of these students who were amazing, and I'm so proud of them. The give and take, the respectful give and take that is every teacher's dream. They have worked really hard. I did want to give a little bit of background. So last year we read the story, The Voyage of Plastiquing. And it was about a man who created a sailboat out of plastic bottles because he wanted to sail by the Great Garbage Patch to find out more about it. So they became very interested in it. And we did a lot of research, and we found out that there was a garbage patch in the ocean. There's 5 of them, actually, but one was the size of Texas. So they just were really, really interested and wanted to know more. So then this year came around, and we read The Invasion of Plastic Bags. And they made the connection to this book. And then we did a little bit more research, and they just decided, like, we really want to do something about this because it means something to us. So their voices are very powerful, they're persuasive, and they are very passionate about this. So I'm going to turn it over. Luke, I'm going to have you start your timer, and you'll find out what that is for in a minute.
Please
participate.
Plastic Balloons by Sophia, Francesca,
Luca,
Veronica, and Miss Fritz. Close your eyes and imagine our beautiful Earth. Now keep them closed. Now imagine a year's worth of plastic bags wrapped around the Earth 4,200 times.
now open your eyes.
%95 of plastic bags are not recycled. But the real topic we should be talking about is that they can be recycled. We are using approximately 500 billion single-use plastic bags per year. This is about 1 million plastic bags every minute across the globe, or 500 bags a year for every person on Earth. This is 500 plastic bags. This is what every person uses in 1 year. Out of all of these, 2.5 are recycled. This plastic can take up to thousands of years to break down. But the sad thing is, it just turns into smaller pieces, and animals can swallow it up and then die. One scientist found over 85 pieces of plastic in the stomach of a 2-inch fish.
How much fish do you eat?
Harmful effects. There are more harmful effects from plastic than you think.
Have you ever wondered how bad plastic is for our environment? It is hurting all countries in our world by polluting our environment. It is also hurting animals in the ocean, especially turtles and seals. We don't want this to happen. Let's change this. A lot of animals are killed each year by plastic bags. Birds, seals, dolphins, turtles, and fish all eat plastic bags because they think it's their food. 100 million marine animals die from plastic bags every year. Many others get injured and very sick. Almost all animals can die or get very injured from plastic. Disgusting.
I would not want to swim in that.
Ugh, gross.
It's hard to believe, but someday one of these plastic bags can end up in the ocean.
We wanted to look at both sides, and we know there are pros of plastic bags. They are basically recyclable. However, only 5% are recycled. They are durable and can be used more than once, but even after they are used a second time, most people throw them away and don't recycle them. They can be easily used to carry your groceries. However, so can reusable bags. They take up less space, but is that convenience worth destroying our earth? Plastic bags are useful for 5 minutes, but deadly for 1,000 years.
This is even affecting our school.
Pictures from our local area.
This plastic bag was seen outside Miss Anderson's room at Center School, which is my class, and all these other plastic bags were seen around town.
Please help us. We have 3 goals. Our first goal was accomplished. Our first goal was to put plastic bag recyclable containers in all the rooms at Center School. This was already done in the cafeteria and was a big success. We are working on creating a video to educate each class on how to reduce their use of plastic bags and how to recycle the ones that they do use. We needed permission from Mrs. Hutton to recycle these plastic bags.
She said yes.
We asked the PTO to fund the containers needed.
They also said yes.
Everything in white is updated since our PTO presentation.
We also have 2 other goals that we want to accomplish. This is just the beginning.
Our next steps, goals 2 and 3. Our second goal, we are presenting to you, the school committee, to try to get our whole district on board of plastic bag recycling. We would like to present to the town. We would like to start a movement to ban plastic bags in the town of Longmeadow. The fact is, no matter how much we recycle plastic, it's here to stay. It will never go away. We need to stop making it. We are willing to be student ambassadors for this project. Since we are going to Williams next year, we are happy to...
At the time that we started this presentation, 5 million plastic bags were just used around our globe.
Start the recycling there. We are also willing to meet with anyone to explain how we started this project at Center.
Town of Longmeadow. We should ban plastic bags in Longmeadow because plastic bags are polluting our earth and it needs to come to a stop. At least put a tax on plastic bags in grocery stores so people think twice before using them. There are many places that have banned plastic bags. Stop the plastic bag invasion. There have been many places that have banned plastic bags, such as Bangladesh and Ireland. Bangladesh banned plastic bags because they got this terrible storm that rained and rained. The rain should have gone down their draining system, but the plastic bags had flooded their draining system and flooded their town. In Ireland, they had put a tax on plastic bags, which eventually people stopped using them. It is now socially unacceptable in Ireland to use plastic bags. Let's follow their lead. They have been in this place for 15 years. What are we waiting for? Many local communities have followed their lead. Amherst and Northampton have already banned plastic bags, and Springfield has proposed a ban. There are currently 61 cities and towns in Massachusetts that have plastic bag regulations. Why isn't Long Meadow on this list? Here's the L section. Where's Long Meadow? It's not there.
I just noticed that it went up to 65 since the last time we did this.
Yeah.
Oh.
Let's stop choking the earth with plastic and let it breathe. Give Ms. Fritz a second to change to the next slideshow.
Listen to the sound of my voice. Can you feel the beat of my heart? Listen to the questions I have. Listen to me. It's all very simple to see what we need. Give us hope. My voice is calling. Can you see? Look in my eyes. Can you feel? My hand is reaching. Give us hope, and we'll show you the way. Listen to the sound of my voice. Can you feel the beat of my heart? Listen to the questions I have. Listen to me. We are the future. Help us believe. Give us hope. My voice is calling. Can you see? Look in my eyes. Can you feel? My hand is reaching. Give us hope, and we'll show you the way. Take my hand. Now look in my eyes. Tell me what you see. Give us hope. My voice is calling. Can you see? Look in my eyes. Can you feel? My hand is reaching. Give us hope, and we'll show you the way. Give us hope. My voice is calling. Can you see? Look in my eyes. Can you feel? My hand is reaching. Give us hope, and we'll show you the way. Show you the way. My voice is calling.
We hope that you are as sad and outraged as we were when we learned this information. This is absolutely unacceptable in our day and age. We are the future and we want to make it brighter.
Any questions or comments?
So I think the way in our town that you could actually go forward with this is at the town meeting, you can put a citizen's petition. And I know it happened, actually, a couple students a year or two ago did the traffic and the speed in town, so that's how that got on. You could do something similar here on this issue too, and also you could go to the Board of Selectmen. And the Board of Selectmen kind of controls the warrants. So I agree with you completely too, by the way, so, and very good job.
Job well done to all of
Yeah.
you, really. Fifth grade, right? I can totally tell that you have benefited from powerful presentations in second grade because you are articulate, you are passionate, you made eye contact. With Luca as your visual aid, you can't lose. You guys put together a really, really great presentation, and I love this part of being on the school committee, seeing what you guys are doing, that you took something that you read, it struck a chord with you, you did the research, and here you are presenting the material. That's what this district's all about. So job well done. I agree with Russ. Before you even got to the frame that said these are the steps we want to take, the second frame you put up, I'm like, these kids need to be in front of the select board. And then you put the frame up, I'm like, good that you had those other goals. So I totally support you. Great job.
So tell us about your plastic bag costume. How long did that take you guys? Did you all make it together? Or?
Well, yeah, kind of.
Yeah?
So
Nice.
basically, he has pants, his jacket, and a hat, and then we have 500 plastic bags, and we tied them to a ribbon, which was attached. On each side of the ribbon was bobby pins, and we attached it to the clothes, and then he just put it on.
Very powerful.
Yes, very hot.
He said he thought homeless people could wear it and be very warm in the winter.
Or you could pass it down to your sibling for the center school Halloween parade. You could see it's recycling, right?
That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Nice job.
Thank you.
And I hope that you do present to the selectmen, and then I actually would love to see you present at town meeting if you have an opportunity to, because that would be incredible. Thank you so much.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
You don't love all parts of the committee?
What's up?
You don't love all parts of being on the committee?
That's the part I love the most. This year.
Okay, next on our agenda, we're going to move to introduce our new facilities director. I'm going to let Marty.
Sure. So we're excited to introduce Mr. John Clunan as the new facilities director, and thank Tom Mazza for representing the school department on the screening and search and the interview process. So John comes to us with a wealth of experience. He hit the ground running since he started on March 19th. Met with us as an administrative team and has been meeting with the principals individually. So we thought, since sometimes the facilities director comes to your meetings, it'd be a good idea to introduce him to the community and to the committee. So, John Clunan, welcome.
Thanks for that.
Hello.
Appreciate it. I'd just like to start with, I enjoy working here. It's been an adventure for the first week and one day. I did come back again today, so that's a good thing. A little history on me. I previously worked at American Saw in East Long Meadow for 24 years in facilities, and most recently was in DPW in the town of Suffield, where I ran projects and took care of all the town building maintenance needs. Like Marty says, I've currently set up meetings with the schools principals to discuss their current and future needs. Going forward, we've already met with 2 principals, and I'm hoping to meet with 2 more next week to find out what their needs are in the schools. I currently reside in East Long Meadow with my wife Maria and my 2 sons Sean and Ian. And again, I look forward to working with the town and the schools. Any questions for me at all? Or?
Anyone? No questions?
There's gotta be one,
Thank
right?
you. Do you know what you're getting yourself into?
I keep hearing that. But, I'm looking forward to it.
Great.
We've been talking to John a little bit about the middle schools and the statements of interest that we submitted, so we'll have to get those documents to you. It'd be a good sort of primer on the status and condition of the middle schools at least. So. Yeah.
Great.
We look forward to working with you too.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John.
All righty.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Yeah.
Okay, and then next on our agenda, we're going to go to the report card committee for an update and a presentation.
Sue, would you like to introduce?
Yeah, or unless you want to, good?
No, I mean, Sue's been really involved with the committee from the beginning, and so I think it would make sense for you to introduce and set the context, I guess.
Okay, so this is Juliet and Julia, and they both are Center School special education teachers.
Mm.
Juliet is a special education teacher, and Julia is a special education teacher. 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 And Julia is a special education teacher Oh, no, you're not, sorry. 5th grade. And Juliet is doing an internship, just so you know, with mostly Jean, but she came over to the regular ed side to work on report card committee, and she's been doing that diligently for quite a long time now. So a ton of the credit goes to Juliet for all of the work that's happened on this committee and the vast number of teachers who serve on the committee. We've had a really big group, a really committed group, and you know, Marty's been involved and the principals have been involved, and everybody has a lot to say about it. So it's been a really good committee. So I'm going to start us off a little bit, and then I'm going to turn it over to Juliet. And Julia, you can speak up at any time. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer as I go or after. Let me see if I can get us on here.
And while Sue's pulling that up, I just would say I've been incredibly impressed by the work of the principals, Sue's leadership, and the work of the Standards-Based Report Card Committee. They've been at this for some time, and very often, you know, administrators find themselves sort of having to push things forward or initiate, you know, some project. And I would say this has been very different in that the Standards-Based Report Card Committee has been pushing us on this issue and bringing forward the best work they possibly can, and I think putting us in a great direction in terms of getting parents better feedback than they've ever seen. So,
All right, let's see if we can get going. So this is a fellow. His name is Ken O'Connor. He works for a major educational consultant company, and I'm going to play the video for you and then turn it over to the girls. But this is about the mind shift that we need to take when we start talking about standards-based grading, and it's a big shift for all of us. So I hope it comes in, and I hope it works.
So I believe that the essential question that we have to ask about grades and grading is this: how confident are you that the grades that students get in your schools, in your school districts, meet these 4 conditions? Because I believe that these are the conditions of quality for grades. Grades to be effective, they need to be consistent, accurate, meaningful, and supportive of learning. First of all, they need to be consistent. It shouldn't be a matter of chance whether a student is in teacher X or teacher Y's class. If they're achieving at the same level, they should get the same grade. And unfortunately, that often has not been the case, because teachers have had very different ideas about what ingredients go into grades, and they've had very different ideas about performance standards. And as a result, students who have been achieving at the same level have frequently got the same grades. And in any system, but especially in a standards-based system, I think we have to see that as being unacceptable. Secondly, grades need to be accurate. Very important decisions are made about and by students on the basis of grades. For those to be good decisions, they need to be based on accurate information. And of course, grades basically result from combining a whole lot of information, most commonly into a single symbol. We scrunch information in that way, there's a real danger that we lose accuracy. So we need to think about what contributes to accuracy. And so that's a second really important condition. Third, and somewhat similar but a little bit different, is are they meaningful? As much as is possible for a summary symbol, give information about students' achievement of learning goals. And fourth, and I believe most importantly, are they supportive of learning? If what we are doing in the assessment and learning process, making it obvious to everybody involved, students, parents, teachers, that the focus of what we're doing is on learning. That school, put a little tritely, is a learning game, not a grading game. And I think we will know what we have got somewhere with this when we find parents coming to us and saying, not what can I do to improve my grade, but what can I do to improve my learning? And ultimately that's, I think, to get to, and hopefully we'll get there fairly soon in a very general way.
So I love that school is a learning game, not a grading game. And so that's a real shift that I think we all need to take in order to get our students on board and being measured effectively. The other thing is you have a packet that has a lot of information in it. I'm sure you've perused it, for hours. We did tweak the PowerPoint as usual, as late as this afternoon, right? And I just want you to know that we printed in color, but Tom monitored all of the copies that we had. So I'm going to turn it over to Juliet.
Thank you. So I think that Ken O'Connor's framework of, his 4 criteria of consistency, accuracy, meaningful, and supportive of learning was really the framework the committee wrapped our heads around when we first started this work. And we're going to go over kind of our timeline, what we've been doing for the past 2 years with this, and where we are now in creating this tool. So the first thing we started with what's a goal of a report card, and we were really reflective on our current report card. So in your packets you have the report card that most teachers are using, and then the pilot report card that we've been using this year. And our number one goal was to give that feedback to families and students about progress in the grade level standards versus a traditional achievement grade. And that's the huge shift that we've taken this year. Is traditionally there was really no criteria that was standard from one classroom to another, and so you could average your grades, or you could count homework, or you can count participation. But this is more this is more objective way of grading, where the teachers are all using the same standards and using some of the same language and using the same assessments to assess our students. And stop me at any time if you have questions, or write them down, and I can come back to them. This is just a preview of some of the changes that have been made. These were our learner behaviors previously. Now they're the behaviors that demonstrate school success and citizenship, which I will take the blame for that. That was something I threw out at a meeting, and it sounded really good, and now it's a mouthful. So we are still revising and taking feedback. So we looked at Bloom's taxonomy. We looked at our mathematical practice standards. We looked at the science standards. We looked at growth mindset work, and we really wanted to make this at the forefront of the report card. So you'll notice that's the first thing. Those are the first grades you see, because especially at the elementary level, those are really the most vital behaviors that are indicating how your child's doing. So a lot of thought went into revising those. And this is just a comparison of the old math grades, and you'll notice the highlighting, it says those categories, but the only grade that a student would get was one achievement grade in math. And now they're getting graded on every single one of these standards, and they're getting an indicator for each one of those as it's being assessed and taught. And then really, to understand the report card and the work that went into it, we first kind of had to wrap our heads around, well, what is standards-based grading? We were realizing as we're piloting this that it's really shifting not only just how we score students, but how we teach them and how we assess them. And it's providing multiple opportunities to show mastery of content, and it's providing opportunities for reteaching. So really understanding that this is a large collection of data for each student, and that it's not just an average or the last grade or one summative assessment. So that was the shift. I know the pilot teachers, I keep doing this, Julia is a pilot teacher. I think that was one of the biggest shifts that you faced, was I really am changing the way I'm teaching and grading my students. I'm not on there. And again, one of the other huge mind shifts is it's no longer a bell curve. It's not, comparing your whole class to each other. It's comparing each child to each standard. So every child, it has, a year-end goal to meet each of the grade level standards. And we kind of grappled a lot with this, what year-end meant. We had a lot of conversations because we talked about, maybe breaking it up between benchmarks and, giving some criteria at each trimester. And what we came to a consensus in looking at some other districts and really doing our research was that the goal is that they're meeting these standards by the end of the year. So a big shift for part of the parent education was that they might not see an M, we'll see the new indicators, until the end of the year, which was kind of hard to get used to the meeting. I know that some of you might be pilot parents who have seen a couple rounds of these. Yeah. So you could, interject with how you kind of had to grapple with the new language as well. But I think the biggest thing is that students are compared to themselves and their progress versus other people, and comparing to the other students in the classroom. We have a lot of whys for the shift. I know personally I got involved as a special education teacher, and other people really, when we came together back in 2016, we wanted, again, consistent experiences and consistent assessments and tools and grading and language for all of our students, that we can assess all of our students in the same way and have them accessing the grade level curriculum. So that was how we started, and then thinking about, well, who is this report card for? And it's for you and your children. And so we wanted to make sure that not only was it consistent, but that you had meaningful feedback. It's really hard to know what your child's working on if you just have an achievement grade in math or writing. And now hopefully if you've seen it a few rounds as a pilot parent, you really know the skills that are being taught at each grade level. For those of you who aren't pilot parents, this is an example of a traditional grading system. If a student were to take this assessment and there were 20 questions and they had 3 wrong, they would get an 85, and the teacher might not revisit those questions that they got wrong, because an 85 is pretty good. It sounds like they're doing okay. So this would be the traditional grading. And then compared to the standards-based approach, if you look deeper at the questions that were missed, the 3 questions that were missed are all the same standard. So the teachers, and I know they're doing this now, will then reteach that standard and then reassess that standard to see how the child has progressed in that area. So a little bit about the committee. We have representatives from every school and every grade level, the literacy coaches, math specialists. We have classroom teachers, special ed teachers. Sue and Marty have been involved as well. The administration has been involved. So we really have representation from every stakeholder, in this report card. And we volunteered. Sue sent out an interest email in 2016, and then we started to get together and review literature over the summer of 2016, looking at a lot of other districts who have done this before, and looking at Lexington and Wayland, and thinking, what was their process, and can we borrow some of their process, and some of it we didn't want. So we looked at other districts, and then we met over the summer and surveyed all the staff to kind of frame our work moving forward. So here's what we've done since June 2016. We looked at every single Massachusetts state standard in ELA and math, and then looked at them again because they revised them, so we had to go back to them all. So we did that twice. And then we combined them on the report card. So teachers have rubrics, which you have a copy of the 5th grade rubric in your packet. So you'll see what we've grown to call parent standards are on the report card, and then the children's standards are all the little standards that make up what the parent sees on the report card. So if you ever had a question about, what is going into this grade, you could more specifically ask, and we could tell that. And I think Marty had mentioned that the state was working on a parent-friendly version of the standards, which would be really helpful to support this document. We also vertically and horizontally aligned all the standards from kindergarten to 5th grade, so you as a parent can see the progression of standards if you have multiple children in the district, or you are just following the same child through the grades. We also looked at those indicators. So on the traditional report card, we had those 4 indicators, and that one was really challenging for me because it says warning and failing, and it was a hard thing to have on a report card for elementary school children. And so again, there was a lot of thoughtful discussion around those indicators. I'll talk about them in a little while about what they mean. We created rubrics for every grade level and every standard and each content area, and printed them in color and gave them out so the teachers have that as a resource. We also revised those behaviors that demonstrate school success and citizenship. And we continue to research and plan for PD and parent education as we continue to move through this. So these are the new indicators that we have. We have emerging, progressing, and meeting. And there was, I think, if I had to pick one topic that we grappled with the most, it was this area. And we still are grappling with it through the pilot. We still are considering some changes to the progressing indicator in general, and being really thoughtful in how we can let parents know what that progressing really means at that time. When you get the report card. So that's a conversation we continue to have at the report card meetings. And these are just some words or phrases to associate. It's not really, doesn't necessarily mean this is absolutely the criteria. We do have the criteria on the rubrics, but these are some words to just think about your child. If they're meeting the standard, it means they are independently, consistently, and proficiently doing that skill. Mm-hmm. And so we piloted this year, which has been so helpful. I think the report card committee, we were like ready to go this year. We were like, let's just do it. Everybody should just do it. And I think someone put the brakes on it. And so why don't we pilot first? And I'm so thankful that we did, because we have seen a lot of things through the pilot, and we've really been reflective in how to make this the best tool. So we have 21 teachers across all the grade levels, all the elementary schools. Every grade is represented in the pilot. So far, we've had 2 trimesters. We've had December and March go home. Each trimester, we've done a parent and staff survey to get feedback on how it's working. We also have a high-quality teacher share that we meet after school, and we're working on aligning our assessments and how we're grading those assessments, looking at student samples and really kind of giving ourselves a baseline this year of what emerging, progressing, and meeting looks like at each grade level. The specialist teachers, so PE, music, art, they are anxious to also revise their standards. So they started meeting this year. They were like, you guys are doing this, we want to do it also. So they want to do that. We've worked on some parent education. You might have seen some of the things we've put out. And again, we have that ongoing professional development for the rollout next year. This was some of the community feedback from our last survey that went out. So 86% of the parents found the report card to be clear and easy to understand. And then 74% responded they rated it as good or excellent. And this is what we continue to work on this year and into the summer and next year is we really are reflective and refining what we have right now. And I think what we have right now is already light years ahead of what we had previously, but we still are being super reflective on how we can make this the best we can with the feedback that we're getting from parents and the pilot teachers. The literacy coaches and math specialists are working really hard to make sure that we have aligned assessments for, they worked really hard last summer on making sure that our units of study were all in place, and now it's that second piece of making sure we have at least common summative assessments with a common way to grade those summative assessments. And what it's really made the literacy coaches and math specialists do is be reflective on the assessments we were giving. We're noticing, for example, on some math assessments that one standard was assessed 10 times in one assessment and one standard was only assessed 1 time. So really balancing our assessments and making sure that they're covering what we intend for them to. Again, the special subject teachers are continuing to refine theirs. We had, with the snow day craziness, we had professional development in March, and then we have some slotted for ish. And we have some slotted for August and November as well. So really making sure that people are comfortable with the rollout as teachers, and also that parent piece, making sure you understand, what you're getting home and being able to interpret the information. So our goal, and some of the things that we're still considering this year, is that full implementation for next year across all the grade levels, and then a potential shift to 2 formal reporting periods in January and June, with keeping those conferences, but changing the October conference to November and still keeping that March conference. And that's something the committee is still grappling with and looking at. That came out of a lot of feedback both from parents and the pilot teachers, and looking at other districts as well. and thinking about if our goal is really that year-end mastery or meeting of the standard, how much more information can be put into 2 reporting periods versus not necessarily seeing all the progression through the 3. So that's something we're still talking about, and making sure that if we do recommend that we're going to shift to the 2, that as parents you have enough information in between so there's no surprises in January, and that you know exactly where the students are. So far as the pilot, a lot of the feedback from parents is they feel like the work coming home really is a representation of what's going to be on the report card, so we're feeling pretty positive about that. Any questions? I can explain a little bit about what you have in your packet. You have the old report card and the new report card. If you want to just side by side, hold them up and look at them.
Two-sided.
Yeah.
And then supplementing, you have the rubric. So it's all a 5th grade packet. We have a lot of representation of 4th and 5th grade on the committee, as well as piloting. So they have a lot of work that has gone into this. So there's a math assessment with a cover sheet. So teachers that are piloting, the students are not getting a 1, 2, 3, 4 or a percentage grade on their report card. They're instead getting these cover sheets that really are check boxes of where they are on that standard. And then there's also a cover sheet for an ELA assessment that I was going to print the assessment, but it was 17 pages, and I just kept hearing Tom over and over again in my head. So I didn't include the assessment, but I at least included the cover sheet so you can see, again, it's not a percentage grade, and it's more really how did you do on these standards. I don't know if you want to add anything as a pilot teacher. You're
So something that I'm going to add, I was part of the committee, and I very graciously stepped down when I realized just how much representation 5th grade and my school had on that committee. But I've been blessed to be a pilot teacher this year, and I like the excitement and the action of being kind of on the ground level. This has improved my instruction, and I can say that wholeheartedly and 100% positively, because in the way that I do small groups and I use my RTI block and I use my workshop blocks, I now am being asked to track specific standards for every single student. So when I give students a math test, for example, math is just on my brain. If I see that, a student who I thought really had the hang of a certain standard beforehand kind of bombed that area on a test, I would kind of think, oh, that's okay. But what I might not have seen originally is that was a huge gap in knowledge, and they were able to kind of cover it up. Now with the way that we're doing qualitative checks, so I do quick checks with my students where we sit down and we solve one problem. So we've been out of our addition of fractions with unlike denominators since it was one of our first units. And I can see how much they've retained of that skill, and that's allowing me to know where those gaps are still in their knowledge. So it's allowing me to kind of go in and make sure that we're filling those gaps and continuing to build on their learning, which has been really powerful. So it has been a journey. It did feel a little bit ridiculous. If you got the report card, you may have seen like a lot of blanks or NAs because a lot of the math standards aren't being addressed at the very beginning of the year. But I think it's also been a really fulfilling and rewarding journey for me and my team to kind of go through the process of really making sure you know those standards inside and out and holding yourself 100% accountable to them. And it has I think it has made all of us better teachers.
I think along with that, it's important to know that it's been a ton of hard work, and Julia is that kind of teacher. She dives into everything, but we are asking a lot of elementary teachers with this initiative, and they are changing the way they're grading. They are sending a lot more information home to parents, so I just want us all to be mindful, when the whole team starts next year, that it is really a lot of work for them, and they already do a ton of work. So it would be good to know of parents who have kids who are piloting, what they think about it, or any questions, or...
First of all, I just want to thank you because I truly appreciate the time and the thought that has gone into this. You can tell just by the presentation that you are all becoming better teachers through this process. I mean, it's just amazing to hear the detail. As a parent, from my perspective, the cover sheets that come home on everything, I know what the kids are working on. I know exactly what my kid is struggling with, what he has mastered. It's so helpful to see that aspect of it, and I don't even need to look at the report card. I know what he's going to get just based on those cover sheets. And I had a conversation at conferences with my son's teacher and asked, how do you think it's going? What do you think? Is it really time intensive? And she said, yeah, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of work. And so I do appreciate all of that hard work and the time that you all and the teachers are putting into it. But I think it's amazing, and I really do. I think it's really helpful to understand really what the kids are learning rather than just seeing, a grade and being like, oh, all right, yeah, I guess you're doing pretty good. Now I really know what you're working on. I really know what's going on in the classroom. So I do appreciate it. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my fourth grader is doing it too. And it's funny because she always says, Dad, that means like a 3 or a 4.
No! I have stories for you.
I don't think so. But I love this. I mean, the new format is so much better because we actually understand. It actually prevents, I think, probably a lot of parents from calling teachers to say, well, what do you mean they got a 2? Is it a 2 because it just said 2 for science and you had no idea what it was? So now you can look at this throughout and just figure out, okay, she's struggling in this or she's great at this. And it's so much easier. I think over the long run, it'll be so much better for the kids. It's better for the parents. It probably will be better for you too, even though it's like a lot of work up front. But I'm really impressed you volunteered to do this. I mean, this has got to be a ton of work. So I'm really happy you did it, and I think it's working great.
Thank you.
And I think the kids like it too, because my daughter really understands what she's struggling in.
Yeah.
It's much clearer to her.
Can I build on that? So I have kids who, after they get an assessment, yes, I'm a P. They're like, I'm learning it. I'm going to be there by the end of the year. And I was like, wow, what a mind shift in these little tiny children who who when I was in school, it's like, am I getting an A? Am I getting an A? These kids can be satisfied knowing that they're making progress toward being an end of the year 5th grader. And I think that mental shift in them it totally embraces the idea of growth mindset, and struggling and not getting it right the first time. It's such an important thing for students to be absorbing into themselves. So I'm glad that you're sensing that with your child as well. It's very cool.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, is the student experience with this, how it's changed them as learners, and are they embracing that growth mindset? Are they understanding that learning involves perseverance and working towards a goal? And because if you get an A in September, in the traditional grading system, you get an A in September, you're like, hey, I'm great at math.
Right.
I got this down pat. But now, even the highest achieving students will be able to identify areas of weakness or areas that they need to work on, I suppose.
Yeah.
Or dive deeper into things they know really well, right?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, are kids embracing it? Do they understand it?
I think they really, so every time we're about to send home a big assignment or a report card, we kind of have the talk of, an M means that you're where you need to be at the end of this grade. So if you received an M on this, that's incredible. But if you're still getting a progressing, you are exactly where you should be at this point in the year. And I think that mental shift has really affected. I had a student at the beginning of the year say that having a growth mindset is so hard, but I'm really trying. And I think that this has really helped a lot of those students who kind of thought of their own personal success and value through grades. I really do think it's helped shift that for them.
And I'm also not seeing the grade comparing. It's not like, what did you get? Did you get a 90? Did you get so the kids are just, they know exactly where they're at, and they know what they need to work on. And I think also what Sue had said and what Julia had said is kids who know when they meet that standard, they know they're not just done with it. Also, they're given opportunities to go deeper in that. And I think of just the example of, if you can add 2 plus 2, you're meeting a standard. If you can do it with manipulatives, you're still meeting a standard. If you could explain it to someone else, you're meeting a standard. So there's so many different ways for them to dig deeper and show deeper understanding. So I think they're really, understanding that part of it too.
The other side that we didn't showcase is there's a massive technical piece to this, and our IT department has been working on it probably since before we started, actually. They had a consultant in, and Nick and Osa Nielsen has been amazing at helping the committee, get something that they like the look of, and The Power School, Power Grade gradebook's got some really good features that teachers can use. So OSA has been going around to teachers to try to teach them that, but that'll be another big part of next year's kind of education. So kudos to our IT team.
Totally.
Yeah.
Beth?
I love this. I love this. I want to say thank you for coming and presenting, but really take that thank you back to your committee, because it's very clear to me the amount of work and effort and research and time that you've put into this, but what an awesome result. And I have to say, I come at this a little bit skewed, because in my former life as a substitute teacher, I have been in both Juliet and Julia's classes, so this does not surprise me one bit from either one of you ladies. I can tell how excited you are about it just by the way you're presenting.
Thank you.
But I love, love, love that these, I mean, even when you just look at them side by side, and we look at our former report card where we're not really gleaning a lot of in-depth information, and then as a parent, you can look at this, and I'm sure as a teacher, and like you said, you've restructured your assessments. This to me says we're building successful learners, because we're catching kids on very specific tasks that, like, I think Julia, you had mentioned maybe we're masked. So maybe in second grade we're not seeing that so-and-so is struggling until we get to maybe fourth grade, when you're really, not learning to read anymore, you're reading to learn. And you're seeing, but maybe in second grade we're already going to go ahead and be able to zero in on that. So I love that we're really getting that in-depth look at how kids are mastering those tasks. So I appreciate it.
Anyone else? Karen?
Is there any plan to go further with this?
You must have been at our administrators meeting this morning. Yeah. So we've been talking about that. It's sort of how, how does this approach roll up into the middle school, and how do we create that transition, sort of that seamless transition in ways that are developmentally appropriate for middle school kids, and so what's necessarily appropriate for elementary kids may or may not work at the middle level, but we do recognize that we're going to have to think about how that rolls out going forward. The other thing I'd say is that we think that this is such a fundamental shift in the way we're reporting student progress. We would like to bring it back to the committee for an approval vote or a disapproval vote at probably late April, early May.
Yeah.
When there's a couple of remaining questions that the committee is grappling with, but we're 95% there right now. So
I forgot about one thing I wanted to say. So one thing that's made a lot better was parent-teacher conference. So I noticed that the parent-teacher conferences would be before, but we were able to kind of walk in and say, so, we noticed that too. What do you think we should do? So it was kind of helpful to have, if you had this before the parent-teacher conference, because before you just walked in, you're like, I never knew why it was a 2 or 3 or 4. So you'd walk in and you'd say, well, so what's she struggling in math? So now you actually know, so the conversation's productive, unlike most parent-teacher conferences when you're just kind of hearing general things. It actually made it a lot more useful. So that's the only thing I'm not sure if we could do that, but it's something to think about.
Well, historically, the October conference has been like a goal-setting conference, and that's what it started as. And so, obviously we're not going to be able to do one in June, after. So I think we were just trying to think, in November you would have enough data or information to have a conversation, and then in March there's another so you're getting
After the
information
first
along the
one.
way. You get one after the first one. But no, I mean, that's what we're grappling with, is what's the best way to communicate in the interim and make sure that you guys, there's absolutely no surprises when you get a report card. Like Karen said, she's like, I don't even need to look at this. So that's the biggest conversation we're still having, is how are we going to do this successfully and roll it out in a way that parents are comfortable and staff is comfortable. So I appreciate hearing that, because we're still trying to figure that out.
But that is one of the things that we will probably come back with, is if the recommendation is to go to a 2-term report card. There just aren't enough opportunities to assess student learning by that first report card on the old or the new, given all of the days we have off between the first day of school and the report card date. So I think teachers were worried about it prior to, and they're even more concerned now with this type of report card, so.
I mean, it's good. I'd rather have more detail laid out this way, less frequently. I mean, I think that makes sense. 'Cause
And
you
that
can't-
was-
you know, it's,
A lot of the feedback we got from the parent surveys that, there was some comments in there, like, there wasn't a lot on the first one, I could do with just 2, so that's what got us thinking about maybe making that shift.
And then you think about all those cover sheets that are coming home on every child's assignment. So, like Karen said, like you would know where your child would be kind of in those interim periods when teachers are using those.
well, you also have to balance how much work you're giving the teachers. So to say you're going to do all this and you're still going to do the same number of reports, I mean, I can totally understand why.
And you might not get a cover sheet for every single thing that comes home. You're gonna get it for your.
Yeah.
The goal is to have those cover sheets for summative assessments. So obviously we have common curriculum and it's our district goal to all be aligned. And so the goal would be to have at least common summative assessments and then have cover sheets. Like I said, the literacy coaches and math specialists are working on making sure we have at least those summative assessments, and then teachers obviously have their creative spin on how they want to do all their formative assessments or interim assessments. So that's the work that we're trying to roll out for August.
I'm glad you mentioned the alignment goal, because that is an important part of our district improvement plan. And so sort of the secondary benefit of this is the alignment of instructional practice, the alignment of assessment practice. So that's been great to see as well.
I just go back to the Ken O'Connor where he said it shouldn't be left to chance. The experience your child has, whether they're at Blueberry or Wolf Swamper Center, it should really be a consistent experience. And it doesn't matter if you had Miss Manna or someone else. It really should be a similar experience. And I think this report card is getting us closer to that.
Makes sense.
I just had one last comment that I thought of when Marty was talking about district goals that I forgot to mention when I spoke earlier, that I like the way that this really aligns to with our district goals as far as social emotional learning. I think it takes a lot of the anxiety that kids may have about grades, and I know sometimes it's not the popular approach, but I was always the parent that was like, I don't care if you got a C+. Did you learn the material? Do you know it enough so that next year you can build on it? Because if you don't, we have a problem. So that, I think, the way that this is presented takes a lot of that anxiety that maybe kids are hearing, that, you just got to get an A, you got to get an A. But no, are you really learning the material? I think that's what's important.
Melanie?
So I was just going to say, someone mentioned maybe using it at middle school. What's so great to me about elementary level, that's where kids are learning how to learn. They're becoming emerging learners. They're learning that learning is a process. It's a process that they're going to move through. And I think that's a great foundation to set of learning how to learn. Seeing that's more about the climb.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As a parent, as a school committee member, thank you for
Thank you.
being so excited to make this come to us. So
They're
thank you.
enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
You can see that.
and it works. It works. So thank you very much. This was awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So moving backwards, we're just going to go to the approval of our minutes. Melanie, do you want to?
Yes, let me just grab that. Okay, so I move that the school committee approve the minutes to the February 28, 2018 school committee meeting as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
I move that the school committee approve the minutes to the March 6, 2018 school committee meeting as presented.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
I move that the school committee approve the minutes to the March 7, 2018 school committee meeting as presented.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
And lastly, I move that the school committee approve the minutes to the March 14, 2018 school committee meeting as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. Next, we'll go to visitor comments. Okay. School committee announcement and recognition. Russ?
So the task force met today, the tax levy ceiling task force. And we talked about
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So we talked about how we're going to pick the 4 community members. So the notice that went out, I think, said the school committee picks 2 and the board picks 2, and that's not actually, what we actually talked about doing is that the task force would pick the 4 members. So instead of coming back here, going to the board, we might have to have a joint meeting or something. We felt it made more sense for the task force itself to just pick the 4 community members. I think we only have 2 that have applied. I know there's a 3rd one that's likely going to apply. But we would need the school committee to vote on that, not tonight, but probably a future meeting. And then the board would have to do it as well, because we're basically a subcommittee. So we don't have the authority to actually do that without the approval of the overall bodies. So I wanted to let you know that. It's probably some future meeting, well, maybe in the next meeting, we'd have to do that.
Thank you. Any other announcements from school committee? Okay. Moving along, we are now in ongoing business. We have an athletic report and fee update. Marty, do you want to?
Sure. So in your packet, there's a fairly lengthy written report on LHS athletics, and it offers a sort of snapshot of some of the initiatives that have been underway or are planned to improve the athletic experience of our student athletes. And I think the thought was that we wanted to get this information in your hands tonight to let you know about some of the work that has been undertaken. But if the committee is interested, we would perhaps have Principal Landers, Athletic Director Capitasto come back and sort of do more of a presentation on some of the items that are in this written report for you tonight. But I think the committee was interested in moving forward on the athletic fee structure. There's been a lot of conversation on this, a lot of study of this, and we are, sort of interested in modifying the fee structure. It really hasn't been touched since 2007 or so, and so it really was overdue for a review and an update. And so after sort of gathering feedback from the high school administration, from the finance subcommittee, from this committee as a whole, Mr. Mazza put together a spreadsheet that offers some recommendations on the fee structure going forward. And sort of conceptually, what this new fee structure, proposed fee structure would do to modify and reduce fees in sports where revenue exceeds expenses. So in some cases, it's where there's sort of high participation, but maybe low costs, but it's an attempt to bring the fee structure more in line with existing revenue and the costs of running each sport. So the spreadsheet details what I just described, and I don't know if you need, the proposed adjustments are in there. I don't know if you would like Tom to explain that in some more detail, or does it speak for itself? How would you like to proceed?
Yeah, I'll be happy to kind of give a quick overview. Based on our last meeting and the conversation we had looking at those sports that had a high participation, low cost, and taking the proposed increase for athletics next year and allocating the current amount we have, kind of came up with a list of programs where the current fees and money that the general funds that we appropriate towards them exceed their cost. So it made the most sense to look at those particular programs and also the percentage that the fee itself contributes towards the overall expenditures of that program. So what you have is kind of a proposal where 9 sports would be reduced by $25. And those sports would be the boys cross country, boys and girls soccer, boys and girls tennis, cheerleading, girls cross country, indoor track for boys and girls, and then swimming and diving. It affects approximately 43% of participants in sports. It does create an estimated shortfall of about, again, it's going to vary depending upon the number of participants, but based on FY18 numbers, it was approximately $14,000, which would be revenue that we would not receive. When we proposed the increase in FY19's budget of $30,000, the expectation was that it would make the program self-sufficient in terms of the amount that's collected from fees and the amount that is appropriated in the general fund. It doesn't cover the full amount of the coach's salary, as we've discussed in the past also, but it eliminates that need for end-of-year transfers to balance out any shortfall that the program might have. So that's kind of where it is. I did look at possibly higher reductions in less sports, but it brought the number of athletes that it affected down. It didn't offer a reduction in every season. So I kind of went with this proposal based on the number of programs that are ending up with a not deficit at the end of the season.
Questions for Tom or Marty?
I guess I'll kick it off.
All right.
I know we've struggled with this for a while, and I appreciate what I'm seeing here, and I think what strikes me is the percentage of students that we're going to be able to, you said it's like 43 that it affects, so I think we are trying to move forward and alleviate costs for parents. I don't know, I just feel like I'm still stuck on how arbitrary these fees are. So while I know we're trying to do what we can to have the less impact on the program, and I think this is a good start, like I think Russ had mentioned, that maybe in the future we can at least cut some of these this year in the hopes of maybe funding the budget more so that we can kind of take a look at reducing the majority of these fees maybe 2 or 3 years down the road. But the way they're set so arbitrarily, I cannot get my head around how football, and I don't mean to pick on football, but it is the most expensive sport that we fund at $51,000. It's right up there with boys hockey and girls hockey. And yet the user fee is stagnant at $260. So when I look at this, I'm almost like, gosh, why don't we just like knock everything down to $260? Like to have basketball and cheerleading at $350, but football, the most expensive sport we have, is at $260. I just feel like there's so much more work to be done, I guess, is my opinion. I just feel like they're all so arbitrary when you look at the numbers. But I do appreciate the fact that these sports at least are a start where we can knock at least $25 off, and I think we'll have to think about how do we offset maybe that $14,000. My other concern and question, and I know I've heard this in the community, is the family cap. So the family cap is at 5 sports, and I know Tom and I have talked about this before, and it's really hard to achieve the family cap. I am reluctant to use my own family as an example because I probably won't vote on any of this because I have 3 student athletes at the high school. But the family cap is crazy to achieve. I have 3 kids at the high school, and I just this year, I will share that I achieved the cap at just this spring. But I paid $1,300 in fees before I got to the cap. So there are very few families that are hitting that cap, and I think we really need to think about maybe the cap should be 4, maybe the cap should be $1,000. Like once you spend $1,000, then the rest of your sports are no charge. I really feel like the cap is something that's, I mean, I don't know, I'd love to see how many families have, even if you had 2 athletes at the high school, they'd have to play a sport every single season for you to benefit from the cap. So I think that's another piece of this that I'd like to see us kind of explore, and that's maybe something that we can, get Tom and Mike here, and I hate to kick it back to finance sub, but I feel like there's so much going on with athletics that we really need to do better, I think, at trying to alleviate some of these costs for families. But I think it's a great start.
Anyone else? Karen?
Just, I really appreciate all of this, and I find the percentages to be really helpful to look at, just the way my brain works. So I guess when Beth talks about it being a little bit arbitrary, I'm curious as to how the fees were set from the beginning to understand, is football less because they have gate receipts? Is it, I guess it's hard for me to understand where everything sort of fits in, and then looking at the percentages and then saying, well, is there some way that we could make it more equitable by looking at the breakdown of the percentages and saying, we have some sports that are close to 10% of the total user fees, and then others that are like 1%. Or then you look at the, the expense for the sport. Should we be looking at the percentages there and try to make those more equitable and see how that all falls out? It's just something to think about.
I'll give you my best. The fees were set before I started. From what I've heard, it was based on the premise of trying to charge to allow it to be a break even based on the fee and participants at the time. So obviously over the course of 10 plus years and not any significant real changes, and changes in reducing or increasing participants, changing in cost of programs and equipment, that hasn't kept up with what we're seeing for expenses. In terms of the percentages, I would probably gear my direction towards the latter as a percentage of the expenses, because it's not necessarily fair when you're looking at a low number of participants and trying to expect them to contribute in terms of the overall fee structure, especially when the fees are different. I also think, to Beth's point, I think the family cap was established back when the fees were all consistent. I think it's when it was $95 across the board for any sport. I think what we see when we put in this tiered approach is that, yes, you could have 5 sports played at the lower end, or you could have 5 that are all at the $350 or $600, and it's a big difference in terms of what each family will pay. So there's probably some validity to looking at maybe a dollar amount instead of a number of sports. That might be more beneficial, and more families would become eligible. Because I think right now we probably have very few that actually meet that criteria of 5 paid sports before they get some relief. So Karen, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's probably the most information in terms of what I have for history on it.
Yep. And I think to step back further, you've had a sort of structural problem with the funding of athletics for a while, where Tom has been challenged at the end of the year to sort of account for the amount that we budget for from the general fund. And so, to the committee's credit, they've increased that amount over 2 years. And so you're putting yourself in a position where you can reduce the fees. And it might be something that you just try to achieve over a series of years, because if you try to achieve it all at once, then you're going to create a hole for yourself in the budget, or you're going to create a situation where we're going to have to make some changes to the experience of the kids, which we don't want to do. So it's how do you navigate that? I think it's the challenge.
I think, I guess I'll just reflect on, we've kind of taken a lot of stabs at this at the finance subcommittee level, and I know administration has looked at it for a while too, and I think it's a huge undertaking. I think this is a great start. So I don't hesitate to say let's go with this. And I don't know how many people would run away from me making this, comparison, but I think maybe it needs a committee similar to what happened with the report card committee, but not, where a lot of great minds get together and kind of look at the big puzzle that we have here, and that we, what our goals are. And so maybe, if we make a plan to try to make these big changes that we're talking about over a course of 2 or 3 years, and we put some people together to try to take a stab at it. I think it's bigger than just finance sub and trying to accomplish it in a short period of time. So I think this is a good start. I guess I'd like to propose maybe beginning with this and trying to look at it from a broader perspective and a longer term.
Are there, so if this were sort of acceptable as a step one, are you interested in a step two for FY '19? Or is that something you would want to have us plan for FY '20? So for example, if the family cap, which I agree with what everyone said about the family cap, I think it's inequitable in the way it's applied, it's tough to achieve, it's a high threshold. So I guess we would just want to know, do you want us to go back and try and come up with some additional adjustments, or is this sort of work to get us through FY '19, or, how much, as a step one, do you want a step two, I guess is the question.
This year, is that
Yeah,
what you're
for
asking?
FY '19, or is this, but
I think this is good step one for FY '19. I think the committee and the administration need to talk about seeing if we could budget more money towards athletics again for the following year. And then I do think there needs to be more rhyme or reason to the fees themselves, because it's so, we have 114% for one, and I think the lowest is what, 31% user fees as a percent of the expenses for the sport. The dilemma is some of these sports are, might be teetering on, if we actually increase the fee in one sport, it could make it difficult for that sport to survive. So you don't want to do that either. But there probably should be a better formula, because it really is all over the place at this point. And so I think a combination of looking at the fees more carefully, not for this coming year, but probably the year after, and also looking at how much money we can actually fund athletics, keeping in mind all the other things we need to fund. But I think that would make sense.
I agree. So yeah, I would say,
The more we reduce the costs for the families, the more we go into debt too. That's like, it's like we're working with a double-edged sword.
so I think this is good for now and button it up for this year, and then maybe you all think about, how we can look at this in a bigger way, and what you propose,
I'd love to
for
take
how
a
to
look
do
at the
that.
family cap,
Yep.
at some point. Because I do think
Yep.
it needs to be adjusted.
Mhm.
That family cap goes back many years. We haven't reviewed and revised that at all recently.
So If it happens that you have a new proposal, soon, then tell us about it, but no pressure, and does that sound good to everyone?
Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you. So do we have a motion on here for this?
I move that the school committee adopt the athletic fee schedule as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor? Okay, great, thank you so much for bringing that forward. I'm just going to
Michelle,
move.
sorry.
Oh.
Can you just because of my own personal conflict, can you just mark me as an abstain? I'm not gonna, since we have a
Yep,
quorum
that makes
anyway for
sense.
the
Yep,
vote,
yep.
I'm just gonna abstain from it.
Okay, Diane, you have that? Okay, awesome. And do you have a, Beth or Donna, do you have work here for the, there was something I thought you might have been here for, the center school? Did you want to present on that or anything, or, no? I just wanted to make sure that you weren't waiting on a presentation. Okay, sorry, I just, got it. Okay, so I want to just keep going in the order that we're here? Okay. Capital project request update.
So yes, in your packet is included the warrant article for the annual town meeting for the capital projects that were reviewed by the capital planning committee and eventually authorized by the select board. So if you recall, back in the fall, the committee voted and submitted 9 projects to the town manager for consideration. I highlighted the 2 projects from our prioritized list that were included in the warrant, which were our number 1 project, which is the boiler for Wolf Swamp School. It's experiencing similar issues to the boiler problems we had at Blueberry and Center. it's leaking. I guess we're lucky to get through the heating season without any major catastrophes there. And the second item that was approved is, or recommended, is the resurfacing of the high school pool. So those are the only two projects that were put forward by the committee that were incorporated into the warrant article for consideration at town meeting. So I think there are a couple items that we're probably going to want to come back and talk with the committee on. AEDs is probably the automated external defibrillators that we had requested funding for, is something that we probably will want to engage in a conversation and hopefully get some endorsement to move forward with purchasing those. Another area that we also are talking about is that camera project, and maybe looking to maybe purchase some of the back-end equipment, the servers that are necessary to support expansion of cameras throughout the district. So, but I just wanted to kind of update the committee on the items that we submitted and then what was actually recommended and incorporated into the article.
So I noticed we also have Glenbrook School Field Well and Irrigation, which we didn't put on the list, but
Correct.
that's good that that's happening.
Yes.
Because it's a disaster right now. Blueberry Hill, do you have any idea? I know that's not really our project, but is that going forward?
I
the
haven't,
field?
I don't know if they've done any of that work yet. I
Okay.
know they were still working on design and bidding, but I mean, I don't anticipate it being ready for this summer, maybe for fall.
Yeah.
Maybe work over the summertime.
I know the soccer is starting to practice there, I think, next week.
Yeah.
But, all right.
Beth?
Thank you.
Tom, was there any, can you give us any reason or discussion about, I'm really concerned that the AED didn't make the list, given that they are past their useful life and we are, I think, not in compliance with Mass General Law?
Yeah, I think the sentiment from capital planning was that they struggled with whether it met the definition of a capital item in the 10-year useful life. The manufacturer of this equipment, I think, has it somewhere around 5 years, even though the ones we currently have are probably at 10 years now. But they felt that, based on that, that they didn't felt within their definition of a capital project. So that's why they did not recommend it.
So even though we tried to loop it in as a district-wide, like, the concern for me is you just hope that you never have to use one of those, but for the one time that you do have to use it, you want it to be able to work. I mean, we've all read stories about, you know, especially on the playing fields, like kids that have, you know, arrhythmias that go undiagnosed, and the one time we need to go ahead and use one of those, it's really concerning to me that the town isn't considering that a dangerous territory to be in.
I mean, the trainer does have one with them, but
Okay.
with the new legislation that takes effect July 1, I don't know that the Department of Ed has come out with clarification on what it means to have one present on sidelines. So I did hear from the fire chief today, who spoke to a couple other communities with some ideas that we might be able to try here as a pilot, in terms of if we get funding and endorsement by the committee to purchase them, how we could possibly distribute them so that they are more readily available out on the playing fields for high school sports. Additionally, I think our request expanded the number we had in the buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Most of our buildings have one, a few of them have 2 or 3, so this would put at least 2 in all of the buildings. So they'd be much quicker to get to in the case of an emergency.
Okay. So my last follow-up, I guess, would be, if they're not looking at it as a capital expenditure, are they kind of kicking it back to the school budget and saying?
Yeah, they're saying it's an operation expense.
And that's Finance Subcommittee talked about it, so if we had some additional funds at the end of the year, this is potentially one of the things that the committee would talk about funding.
Okay. It's good to know. It's good to know the conversation that's been had about it.
Yeah, because we kind of felt the same way, so.
Good to know.
Anybody else on that? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to superintendent report.
A
A couple of quick items. No written report. I just wanted to update you. We had a successful parent forum the other night on Dr. Stephen Booz filled in for Jetta Bernier from Mass Kids, and Dr. Booz is a local physician with some expertise in child abuse pediatrics, and did an outstanding job of talking to the parents that were there and the staff that was there about how to keep kids safe and protect their sexual safety. LCTV taped the event, and so we will be sure to blast that out, and I know LCTV will be airing it as well. So we're excited by that presentation. Diane has been great about keeping me up to date on our kindergarten numbers. We're now up to 176 kindergartners, which is much higher than we would have been at this time last year. It could be that our parents are just, that the ones that are on the census are being diligent about registering their children, or this could be a spike that we need to keep our eyes on. So we'll be sure to keep you up to date on that in the weeks and months ahead. The statements of interest were approved by the select board last week. So we have school committee approval, we have select board approval, and so Tom and I were on the MSBA portal today loading the SOIs in there, and so we'll get the vote language and the final certifications, and we'll get those off to the state before the deadline. So we'll be excited to have that sort of off our plates. And then we just sit back and wait. It's typically 7, 8, 9 months before you hear anything from the MSBA on those applications. So that's all I have, and we'll talk later about the center school calendar.
Okay. Anybody, questions for Marty? Okay. I do not have a report tonight. Reggie.
We've had a really good athletic season this year, especially hockey. But another thing that was we always have a really good athletic year, but something that was unique about this winter was the academic teams. And Science Olympiad got in the top 7 at the Brown University Conference and was, I think, around 14 at states, which is pretty good because there's a lot of competitive schools over there. And Chemistry Olympiad, they did really well. They got first in a number of different categories. Model UN got the award for best small delegation, and Sarah Reyes got first in her conference, and Michael Reyes got second in his conference. So that's pretty good at the UMass Model UN. And Math team won Western Mass. And yep. Also, we put our suggestion box has been pretty successful. We've gotten around 20 or so suggestions within 3 days, so we'll be acting on that soon. There's a lot of events coming up, such as a freshman dodgeball tournament and a movie night for juniors. And of course, the seniors are really busy playing high meadows and prom and that stuff. So, also there's a lot of trips for April break, and there's a trip to France for the kids enrolled in French classes, a trip to Italy and Greece for Latin students, and a trip to Japan for members of the East Asia Club. Should I talk about Puerto Rico right now or later?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay, so I approached our student government about a humanitarian trip to Puerto Rico, and we got unanimous support. And so we have a committee together, and we're trying to plan a trip to Puerto Rico next April. One of the parents at the high school is from Puerto Rico, and she's currently volunteering there right now. And she told us that there's a lot of stuff we could do through the Red Cross. It's building houses and things like that. And she knows someone who coordinates part of the Red Cross work. and she said they'd be really happy to have us there. And then the woman who was working there started crying because she was like so moved that we decided to go there, because I guess there's like not many people there who are helping. And yeah, so we're hoping to get that going soon.
So that's an agenda item later on to have you review the proposed trip to Puerto Rico on a humanitarian trip. So we've had international trips obviously for a long, long time, but this is the first, perhaps the first sort of humanitarian relief trip that the high school has sponsored. So Breggy was credited earlier by Mr. Dunkley for bringing this idea forward to the student council, so nice job.
And another thing, it's not going to be like a big trip. It's only going to be like 20 students.
Sounds big.
Thank you for sharing, and that sounds like a great idea. I can't wait to talk about it as a committee. Thank you. Any questions for Breggy? Okay, thanks. Let's see, we are going to move into Finance Subcommittee reports. We met on Thursday, March 22nd. Tom or Russ, do you want to present on anything or talk about anything?
Well, just to follow up on what I just said to Beth, if there's monies, so at the end of the year, if there's monies left, we typically try to figure out what might be best to spend it on. So usually administration will give us kind of a list of things that last year we looked at curriculum, and so we asked administration to really come up with anything that they can think of that would be good to use the money with. Obviously, the committee could do the same. If you have thoughts, send it to Marty and Tom directly, not to the rest of us, because we can't do that because of the open meeting law, but it could go to Marty or Tom. But I think it's important to really, and we said this to administration too, I mean, kind of think outside the box if there's something that we might miss, because we kind of always think about the typical things, but there might be something that we're just not thinking of. And that would be true of teachers, really, too, anybody in the school system that thinks there's something we could use.
I don't have anything. We do have some FY18 grants and special revenue. Tom, do you want to?
Sure. So there are 2 budget transfers. There are a couple of financial reports, a budget report, a revolving account report. It's just informational. Finance sub reviewed them at our meeting. We'll probably start bringing those forward a little more frequently as the fiscal year now is progressing and coming to an end in 3 months. So we have the grants and special revenues. Typically throughout the year, we have a couple transfers that need to take place. In this particular transfer, we have 2 grants in which we are reallocating funds within the appropriation or the grant award amount to be used in the way that the grant overseer is proposing. So one is for the Title 2A grant, and the other is for the drug-free community grant. When we initially set the budget, we weren't exactly sure what the needs were going to be or how they were going to spend the money, so this would align funding to the programs that they are using or would like to use the funds for.
Yep.
I move on the recommendation of the Finance Subcommittee that the school committee approve the budget revision as outlined in the document titled FY18 Grants and Special Revenues Amendment Number 2, dated March 22nd, 2018.
Is there a second? Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
In regard to the general fund budget transfer, I move on the recommendation of the Finance Subcommittee that the school committee approve the budget revision as outlined in the document titled FY18 General Fund Transfer Number 2, dated March 22nd, 2018.
Second.
Okay. Discussion, all those in favor? Okay. Policy sub. Did you meet?
Yes, we met
Okay.
we met last week and we met
Okay.
this morning.
Okay.
So we have, last week we talked about the homeschooling policy, which is IHBG, and the procedures as well, and we're still working on that at this point. We've asked for some clarification from the attorney to understand the policy a little bit more, but we'll get back to you on that one. Then we also looked last week at a really exciting pilot project that's going on in Center School, and it's the use of a therapy dog with some kids who have language-based learning disabilities that will be identified at the school. So we looked at the policy. We all were in agreement that there was room in the policy to allow something like that, and then the Board of Health weighed in with some information and provided some instructions for Center School to use and guidance to give to the families as far as using therapy dogs in school. So it's a really exciting project. I don't know if you want to hear about it.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's a new venture for us. There are, an increasing number of school districts that are involved in using therapy dogs to support students who need, who would benefit from some intervention with an animal. So Donna gave us an example of some reluctant readers who have shown great results in reading out loud to a therapy dog, and so it's something that we would like to pilot. I believe we're talking about 1 day a week for 6 weeks. And Beverly Urshorn from the Board of Health has been great in kind of giving us some guidance to make sure that we can do this in ways that are safe for the school and that we're protective of students who might have allergy issues. We're also cognizant of, students who might have some anxiety related to the presence of an animal, and we're going to be very mindful of that, and we'll be sure to communicate to families at Center School so they understand the parameters of the program. But it's very exciting. Donna has been working closely with Laura Giugio as a staff member who is very knowledgeable in this area, and we have a dog that is sort of going through a certification program, kind of engaged in a practicum.
He passed his certificate.
He has a certificate.
Graduated.
Excellent. All right. Yes. All right. Murphy passed his course, so that's
He's officially a therapy dog.
all right. So we're excited to introduce this at Center School, and be sure to keep you up to date on the results. And we know that it will be very beneficial for some students who need a safe, non-judgmental partner to read to or be with. So we're excited about that.
It's really exciting, and they've done a ton of research and work on it, so it'll be exciting to see the result. And then finally, I think we have for your first reading policy JLCE, which is the substance use verbal screening, which there was some language that from MASC and some policy work that had to be done with substance use. So that should be in your packet.
Thank you. Operations sub did not meet. LPDEC, do we have anything from that? Not tonight. SEAL, nope. And food services met on Thursday, March 22nd. Do you have any updates for us?
We're working on the food share idea with Rachel's Table, trying to see what we can do to assist the Forest Park Zoo with food scraps. Tomorrow the bid responses have been received. Tomorrow are scheduled to have presentations from the 2 vendors that submitted bids. Once that is concluded, we will rank the proposals and then review the financial proposals to bring forward a recommendation to school committee either for your next meeting or definitely by the second one in April.
Okay. Thank you. So we can move on to new business, the makeup snow day at Center School.
So I'm not sure this requires any committee action, but wanted to update the committee and the community on where we stand with the Center School calendar. So you'll recall that 5 of our schools, their scheduled last day is Thursday, June 21st. Center, if we stuck with our regular calendar, their 180th day would be Friday, June 22nd. So last week we learned that the Department of Education was open to some alternative ways of making up lost days due to snow or facility failures or whatever. And so we wanted to explore that. This is the first time that the department has offered districts that flexibility. They've always kind of stuck to the 180-day rule that students have to attend school for 180 days. Something we wish we had known this much earlier in the year. It would have been sort of easier to plan for it and talk to the community about it. But we're thankful that the Department of Education offered us at least the chance to look at this. So what we had thought about was making up that center's sort of extra day by adding hours to existing school days. And so we put a survey out to staff and the parents, and it came back, the parents were divided on the issue, frankly, leaning towards being opposed to the idea of adding additional time to existing days. And I think I understand, the thinking of many of our parents that it creates staggered school schedules, and it, presents some challenges to family schedules. So we think it's best to sort of back off of that idea, frankly, and stick with the sort of school committee approved approach to the calendar, which is going to school 180 days. It would mean that Center's last day will be Friday, whereas the other 5 schools, their last day would be on Thursday. So we would run a half day as planned for all of our schools, including Center, on Thursday the 21st, and then Friday the 21st would also be a half day for our Center School students. Full day for staff on both days, but half day for students on those 2 days. So again, I don't think it requires any committee action. It doesn't adjust the calendar that you've approved. But it was interesting. It was interesting to sort of begin to talk to the community about, how we might make up snow days in the future. And it appears that the Department of Education is going to offer districts some flexibility going forward. So, I think had we known that they were going to offer us that flexibility back in September, we might have been able to kind of have a more involved conversation with the community about how it might look and work and everything. But at this point, we think it would be a little too disruptive to family schedules and even our own schedules, transportation, shared staff. There would be a number of hurdles that we would have to cross in a very short amount of time. But it was interesting to kind of get the sentiment of the community on that issue. So I guess the bottom line is sort of status quo. Center's last day would be on Friday the 22nd. Frankly, we were hopeful that we could add time to existing days. We think that the instructional value of some March, April, May days might exceed the instructional value of the June days, but certainly understand the challenge that it would present to our families in terms of organizing their lives and to pick up their children and after school events and activities and that kind of thing. So that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Thank you. We're going to put that information up on the website for people on top of the.
Yeah, so we've put, I think we had, Diane and I had talked.
But I just didn't put in the half day for
Okay.
it because that is
Yeah.
still being decided.
Yeah.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And so, anybody have any questions on that? No? We can move on to the preliminary overnight field trip request. I believe this is what Reggie was referring to. You should have information in your packets. This is just initial approval, providing the coordinator the approval to solicit prices from the vendor on the field trip to Puerto Rico in April of 2019. Anyone have any more questions on that? Reggie did a great job of explaining it. I'm really excited for this. I hope it works out.
I'm impressed you brought this up.
Yeah, great.
I just had a quick comment. I thought of it, you had presented earlier, and I'm sorry I didn't include it earlier, but I just thought maybe as a suggestion, when you bring it back to student council, there are a few, I want to say maybe 10 or less current Longmeadow students that repeatedly go to Haiti each year.
Yeah.
So in terms of just getting their advice on, you'll work with the Red Cross, I'm sure, in terms of like sustainability and what you're providing, but even if you want to pick their brains about how to make that transition from like life in Longmeadow to a very rural setting, what to pack, what to bring, that might be helpful for you guys to get some insight from them.
Yeah, we can definitely do that, and we will do that as we get closer to
Yeah,
the date. That's
we got a whole
that's a
year.
really good point.
Okay, so we have a motion on the, oh, did you have a question?
No, I was going to make the motion.
Go for it.
Okay, I move that the school committee approve the preliminary request to secure prices and make arrangements for students from Long Meadow High School to travel to Puerto Rico in April of 2019.
You're the second girl.
I'm the second girl today.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Okay, great. Next on our agenda is reorganization planning and future meetings. The election is scheduled for June 12th, and in order to get the new members on the board and possibly schedule some training prior to the first meeting, the meeting scheduled for June 13th is a daytime meeting. We should look at rescheduling that. Russ and I won't be here, but in terms of the committee that will still be, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a great idea,
Okay.
just knowing from our experience, it's tough to pull an all-nighter and then come in the next day for a meeting without any training. So I think it would be good to push it off to see if they could get some training.
Okay. Diane, did you have any results from the Doodle Poll that helped us kind of? Thank you.
Not everybody had taken them.
I have not responded, I
Okay,
apologize.
okay, that's okay. We've all, this was a last minute thing that I put out there, so.
Had a couple
We
things
can.
these past few days.
Sure,
to get
yeah.
done.
But the June 13th meeting, we could probably do outside this meeting. I mean,
Yeah.
the remaining members can work with Diane and figure out if it can be that night or some night near then.
Okay, so we can continue with that. We had two other daytime meetings, one on April 25th and one on May 23rd. And we can't move them to the evening of those days because they conflict with LPVEC, but I did have Diane put out a Doodle Poll to see if there were, enough people with common times that we could try to do an evening meeting instead of a daytime meeting. Did we have any luck on that?
So you wanted to stay away from me. I gave April 25th in the evening anyway, just to see what would happen. So April 25th looked good for most. Anytime. And like I said, not everybody filled out the poll, so I'm missing Stephanie and Melanie.
Did you have a quorum
Nope.
You didn't have a quorum?
Let's see. Yeah, the Wednesdays. It was only Wednesdays, which are the days that are gonna
Conflict?
conflict.
Okay. Okay. So I think based on that, we'll have to just stick with what we have scheduled, except for the June 13th, and we'll take care of that over email. That makes sense? Or, somehow we'll figure out when to schedule the June 13th for, unless, Russ, do you have any?
No, I was just going to say the new committee can decide, if you just go back to evening meetings again, or if you want to do the combination or whatever. It's really up to whoever's on the committee at the time and what their schedules are like, so don't feel like you have to stay with what's going on now. You can easily go back to evening if that's what's better, or all day if you want, I guess. But,
All day.
all day meetings.
So I think on top of that.
They're always all evening, too.
You all might want to decide whether or not to schedule, or we can do this here, whether or not we want to schedule a training now so that it's set in place for the new committee to take advantage of. It was, hard to schedule at the last minute before school got out, and, MASC's schedule is tight too. So I think if you wanted to at least decide now here to take action on scheduling a training, we could do that and get it in place and try to get that out to the candidates running an election to just maybe put a placeholder in their calendar for a training. How does anyone?
So we would want to do something between the election, which takes place June 12th, and
Right.
June 27th, which would be our first evening meeting.
Correct.
Unless we rearrange something with that June 13th and push that back.
Yeah, also, I think as soon as possible after the election would be
Yeah.
the recommendation that I have, really, because also you have to reorganize. You won't have a chair or a vice chair, even on the committee. You won't have us on there, so you'll have to appoint someone, and then we move on to the subcommittees, and a lot of those were confusing for the new members, so I think it just would be helpful to get it in as soon as possible, but.
What if you use that June 13th time as the training that you're thinking about?
Yeah.
About that.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah.
Hopefully, I guess I can speak to the candidates, if they were working during the day on the 12th,
Yeah, that
they're
might
taking
be-
the whole day off, so then
Right.
if they also have to take the 13th
Yeah,
off for
could
the
be.
training, that's the only other tricky
Yeah.
thing, but maybe, how many candidates are there, do we know? We can
4.
reach out to them and see if they would be able to, and
Yeah.
maybe just look at it that way.
And we could check on the availability of someone from the MASC to,
Yeah.
is that what you're thinking, to have-
Right, Glenn
invite someone in to
Kutcher,
do that? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So Diane and I can check on that.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, any other suggestions? I know you were working on a packet in Operations Sub and kind of building off of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we've put together a shared folder that we've kind of dumped some orientation type of documents into it to kind of make sure that people are
Yep.
are ready to hit the ground running.
Good,
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, any other comments or questions on?
Where is that shared folder?
So initially, I've only shared it with Karen as the chair of the operations sub, so I can share that more widely, yeah. Did I share that with you, Karen?
You did,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'll send that out.
Okay, so next on our agenda is the high school start time task force. I think Marty, do you want to talk about this
Yeah,
a
we
little bit?
put a notice out to families a couple of times to solicit community members to be involved in that task force. We were looking for 2 parents, I believe. Or no, I think it was 3 parents, 1 from each level.
Yep.
And so we've got limited response, frankly, and it could be the time of year that we're looking to launch this. But having said that, we also need to pin down who on the school committee would represent. So,
So in terms of a timeline, are you thinking this would start up now or looking at next year?
well, I mean,
We just talked briefly, but we thought we'd bring this back to Operation Sub because this time of year can be really challenging for people. Their schedules are already set. The end of the year starts to come very quickly. People have already kind of volunteered their time as much as they want to volunteer their time. So we thought, again, we have to still bring this to Operation Sub, but we thought maybe to start fresh in September with when people are starting to plan their year, and maybe they would have more times available. And I also thought, when I saw this on the agenda, that because we're going to be getting 2 new members, we may want to think then also of bringing the 2 new members and see if anybody would have interest in being part of that task force.
I think it makes a lot of sense to wait till September for so many reasons, so it helps you not even have to bring it to Operation Sub if anybody else here feels like it timing and, might be more effective to just wait until September for the, kickoff, maybe start planning it now at the administration level, but then, kind of, or at least when you're reorganizing in June.
and we could still do some legwork. I mean, again, we'll have to pull the operations subcommittee together
Yeah.
to see what direction they want to go with it, and I'm happy to start now in one way, shape, or form. I was thinking about the model we use with the middle school task force. We kind of did the road show, and we just kind of made our way to PTO, PAC meetings, PTA meetings, and that seemed to work to try to get the word out. So
Yep.
could be a combination of approaches, I suppose.
Okay.
So is the start time task force just for changing the time for high school?
Yes, but it's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, to review and potentially bring back a recommendation to the full school committee on what sort of the best start time would be for high school students.
So it doesn't affect middle school or elementary level?
It could.
It
And then
could.
trying to
That
get
would be part of the task
transportation,
force,
Okay.
right? That would be-
Drop-offs, pickups. Trying
It
to
could.
coordinate the various school start times.
Have you
Domino effect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you considered like putting students on the task force?
Yes.
So we're looking for 2 students, I think it was, from the high school. And so
Okay.
I'll talk to Mr. Landers about how we might identify a couple of eager students.
Okay.
It will, frankly, this will be a ambitious undertaking. It will take many months. Doubtful, Breggy, that it would give you any additional sleep before you leave Long Meadow High. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's something that I think districts that have undertaken studies of high school start time, they're usually at it for a year and a half, or
Okay.
sometimes longer.
More, yeah.
So it's ambitious.
Thank you. I think that is all that we have for our open meetings, so we can move into executive session if someone wants to make the motion.
I move that the school committee meet in executive session pursuant to MGL 30A, Section 21A, Purpose 2, to conduct a strategy session in preparation for collective bargaining with Unit A, and Purpose 7, consideration of release of executive session minutes from previous meetings, and Purpose 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law pursuant to Massachusetts Student Record Regulations 603 CMR 23, not to reconvene in open session.
This motion calls a roll call vote. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Karen Moore, aye.
Melanie Rothstein, aye.
Michelle Grodzki, aye.
Russell Dupree, aye.
Beth Barron, aye.
Okay, thank you very much, and good night to everyone watching.